In this video, I'm going to show you how to become a vampire in the Elder Scrolls Skyrim. We're also going to cover the pros and cons of vampirism, how to feed on victims, how to cure vampirism if you change your mind, and at the end of the video we'll even look at how to become a powerful vampire lord as part of the Dawnguard DLC. So why bother becoming a vampire in the first place? Well, there are a number of benefits that you can gain from contracting the vampiric disease, and these benefits are tied to the 4 stages that you go through as your vampirism progresses. Firstly, you gain access to 5 totally new abilities. At stage 1, you gain Vampire's Drain, an ability that drains the health of your target and funnels it back to you, basically dealing some steady damage whilst increasing your own survivability. And this spell becomes more powerful as you progress through the 4 stages of vampirism. Also at stage 1 you gain access to the Vampire's Servant ability. Now this is a spell that allows you to reanimate a dead body to fight for you for 60 seconds. And again, this becomes more powerful at later stages of vampirism, allowing you to reanimate more powerful bodies as you progress through the stages. And finally at stage 1 you also receive Vampire's Sight, which allows you to see in the dark for 60 seconds. At stage 2 you gain access to the Vampire's Seduction spell, which basically allows you to pacify an NPC once per day so that you can feed on them even if they're awake. We'll cover more on feeding later in the video. You gain access to the final ability once you progress to stage 4. This is called Embrace of Shadows, which is a spell that allows you to become invisible for 180 seconds once per day. On top of those abilities, you also gain a bonus to your illusion spells and sneak ability, making vampirism a strong choice for stealth characters. You get a 100% resistance to disease and poison, as well as varying degrees of frost resistance based on your stage of vampirism. Rather than go through every single detail for each phase, I'll put the information up on the screen now so that you can pause and review the details if you want to. However, it's not all sunshine and roses in Vampire Town. There are also downsides to vampirism, which also become progressively worse as you move through the 4 stages. These include a weakness to fire and an attribute reduction when exposed to sunlight, as you can see on the screen, and again you might want to pause to review. Not shown on the table, however, is the 3rd downside of vampirism, and probably the most significant one in terms of its impact on your gameplay. This is the fact that the majority of NPCs will dislike you once you become a vampire, which will negatively influence your interactions with them. And at stage 4 of vampirism, you'll actually be attacked on sight if you don't have the Dawnguard DLC installed. The Dawnguard DLC changed a lot of things about how NPCs interact with vampires and made it a lot easier to play as a vampire in Skyrim. You probably have it installed because it's part of the special edition, but it's worth checking. If you have the DLC installed, you'll only get attacked if you're in Vampire Lord form, and we'll get onto that later in the video. Okay, now that you understand the pros and cons of becoming a vampire, let's talk about how to actually become one. It's pretty simple really. You need to go and find a vampire, of which there are many in the game, and I would recommend that you go and find one at Haymar's Shame, at this location on the map. The reason I draw attention to this location in particular is that it can be easily reached early in the game as there's a direct route from Helgen. You just need to follow the path through the mountains. You then need to engage a vampire in combat and let them cast Vampiric Drain on you until you receive a prompt telling you that you have contracted Sanguinare Vampiris, if that's how it's pronounced. Anyway, once you have the disease, you'll need to wait 3 days for the disease to progress to full vampirism. It's extremely obvious when you transform into a vampire as you gain a message telling you that your vampiric powers have been activated, and the appearance of your character will actually change, as you can see here. At this point you're a full-fledged vampire and you've entered the 1st stage of vampirism. From this point onwards you'll advance to a new stage of vampirism every 24 hours if you don't feed on a victim. And you'll gain the effects associated with that stage, as we explored in the previous sections. If you feed at any stage you'll be reset to stage 1, so you don't need to feed 3 times to get from stage 4 back to stage 1. How do you actually feed as a vampire? Well, you basically need to sneak up on a sleeping NPC and use the feed function as I'm showing now. You can even feed on an NPC whilst they're awake by using the Vampire's Seduction ability to pacify them. Of course, as mentioned before, you'll only have this ability if you've progressed to at least stage 2 of vampirism. But what if you contract the vampiric disease accidentally, or change your mind about being a vampire? Well, you can actually cure vampirism, but the way you do this is going to depend on how far the disease has progressed. For the first 3 days after picking up the sanguinare vampiris disease from a vampire, you can simply use a cure disease potion, just like with any other disease. You can also remove the disease by consuming hawk feathers or from receiving a shrine blessing. However, if 3 days have passed and you've progressed to full-blown vampirism, then you're going to need to go to an innkeeper and ask for any rumours that they've heard. You may have to ask the same question a few times until they mention Thalion, and give you a quest called Rising at Dawn. Once you have this quest, it's going to direct you to travel to Morphal. You'll then need to walk to this location on the map to find Thalion, and he's only going to be there between the hours of 1 and 5 AM. But it makes sense to meet him here, as this is ultimately where he's going to perform the ritual to cure your vampirism. You're going to want to turn up with a filled black soul gem if possible, as Thalion requires this item to perform the ritual. If you don't already have one, Thalion will actually sell you one, though it's empty and you're going to have to go and fill it with a reasonably powerful enemy. Once you have a filled black soul gem, Thalion is going to ask you to meet him at the location that you're already at dawn, which in Skyrim is 5 AM. You then need to simply interact with him and he will perform the ritual and cure your vampirism. An alternative method is to become a werewolf through the Companion's questline, as this will also remove your vampirism. However, it's a very long-winded way of getting a cure if you haven't already progressed the Companion's quest chain, but it's an option nonetheless. I'll probably put out a werewolf video soon after this one, so keep an eye on my channel if you're interested in that as well. Finally, you may be aware that as part of the Dawnguard DLC, you have the ability to become a special type of vampire called a Vampire Lord. Vampire Lords get access to another full set of new abilities, including a Raise Dead spell, the ability to evade damage by transforming into a swarm of bats for 2 seconds, and a new version of Vampiric Drain, which rather than just draining health as with normal vampirism, it also drains magicka and stamina, as well as applying an additional damage health effect. Basically, it's just a lot more powerful than the normal version of the spell, as you can see on the screen right now. It's also worth noting that this ability is only available when you're hovering, and you can switch between hovering and walking stances by using the stealth key while in Vampire Lord form. As well as these new abilities, you also gain access to a whole new skill tree, offering perks that will greatly enhance your abilities and even add some new ones whilst you're in Vampire Lord form. To advance through this skill tree, you simply need to use your Vampire Lord abilities to kill enemies. And finally, on top of everything else, while in Vampire Lord form, you'll gain significant increases to your health, magicka and stamina, as well as benefiting from enhanced magicka regen, improved unarmed skill, improved damage resistance, and even the ability to walk or hover on water. On the negative side, your total health, magicka and stamina are reduced during daylight, and your stamina regen is also reduced by a substantial 90% in daylight. Perhaps most significantly of all, as you can see, it's pretty obvious that you're a Vampire Lord once you go into Vampire Lord form, and the vast majority of NPCs will be hostile to you. So to actually become a Vampire Lord, you need to accept Harkon's gift as part of the Dawnguard DLC's main quest chain. You'll be offered this option pretty early on during the Bloodline quest after returning with Serana to Castle Volkihar. Though it is worth noting that this will permanently ally you with the vampire faction for the whole of the Dawnguard DLC story. He can transform you into a Vampire Lord regardless of whether you're currently a vampire or not, and he can even do it if you're a werewolf, though you'll no longer be a werewolf should you choose to accept. It's also worth noting that once you become a Vampire Lord, you will automatically become a normal vampire when you're not in Vampire Lord form. Alternatively, you can have Serana transform you at a later stage of the questline. This will allow you to refuse Harkon's gift and align yourself with the Dawnguard, but still become a Vampire Lord. Specifically, this option will be offered to you by Serana at the end of the Chasing Echoes quest, as a way for you to enter the Soul Cairn. Be careful though, you won't get this option if you're already a regular vampire, because you'll be considered to be effectively dead and able to enter the Soul Cairn without Serana having to transform you. If you do happen to miss this, don't worry, Serana will give you the option again at the end of the Dawnguard DLC questline, and that's regardless of which faction you aligned yourself with. Once you've received the gift from either Harkon or Serana, then you simply need to use the lesser power that will have been added to your spellbook. And that's pretty much it. hopefully this video has been useful in helping you to better understand how vampirism works in Skyrim. I have plenty more Elder Scrolls guides on my channel, with my next big focus being Skyrim. So if that sounds interesting to you, then maybe consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.